Hey now! What is up, everybody? My name is Mike Brown, aka Review King MB, and Smallville Rewind. We're continuing on season 2 with an episode called Suspect. And I'll just say this right off the bat that I enjoyed this episode. I liked a lot of what this episode did as far as the premise that it went for and the way that it delivered the premise. Now, after watching the episode of Talkville, where Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling talked about the episode, maybe they didn't like it as much as I did. And so it made me question. Like, now I'm doing the review after listening to them, which I don't always do. So I'm going to try to talk about what I like about it and what the negatives that they mentioned and if I agree or not. So at the very beginning, the first scene, we see Lionel Luthor, who he's by himself in the mansion. So he's still very much blind, or at least he's willing to pretend to be blind when he's by himself. Like, he's that committed to it. I don't know. It gets more ambiguous and more back and forth on where I stand on if he's faking being blind or not. But somebody enters the main office, and Lionel says to them, oh, is that you? Apparently somebody he has talked to very recently already. He says, I already told you the conversation's over. And then 2 shots. Bam, bam, right in the chest. Lionel falls off the banister and through a glass table. And holy fuck, what a way to start an episode. Lionel is laying there covered in glass, blood coming out of his chest. He looks dead. And can you imagine if this was the way that they killed Lionel Luthor? Kind of random, kind of out of nowhere. Sure, the shock factor is there, and you can argue that there's a certain amount of balls to be had to kill off a major character on a show in that way. But in retrospect, I'm glad this isn't how Lionel dies. There is so much more story and so much more for the John Glover actor to do, to mine from that character, that, it would have probably felt like a waste. But for just an opening scene, just for like the shock and awe and a reason to pull you into the episode and get you interested and curious, like this scene does that and more. Like, you couldn't have asked for a better opening to an episode like this. Then we cut to Jonathan Kent in his truck. He's passed out. Cops come over and wake him up. He's holding a bottle of alcohol in one hand and a gun in the other hand. What? I mean, could you look any more guilty? But as an audience member, you're thinking there's no fucking way Jonathan Kent has killed or shot at Lionel Luthor. He gets arrested. And when Clark and Martha go to Jonathan at the jail cell, Jonathan swears that he doesn't know what happened. He went to the bar, he had 1 beer, he started to feel woozy, he blacked out, and then he woke up with everything around him and the cops there. And so it's like, what the fuck, right? You think, and Clark thinks, that he's being set up for it. But admittedly, like the sheriff and every other cop, it's like, yeah, this looks bad. Like, there's no way to, even if you're close with Jonathan or if you know him well, if you grew up with him, there's no way to really try to twist what this looks like. And you see Clark then goes to Lana's father, Henry, who I forget he was an attorney. It's just not really something that they talk about a whole lot. And Lana's father turns down Clark to be Jonathan's lawyer. He just says, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Even Lana's like, what the hell? And he just leaves, and Lana's apologizing for it. But then Lana says something very interesting. She said that she went to the Luthor mansion to drop off a deposit or some tax thing. I don't really know. I didn't really get what she was saying. But the point is, she was there. She happened to be there at the mansion. She overheard and saw Jonathan and Lionel arguing. And she says Jonathan looked very upset, angry. He threatened Lionel. And she tells Clark, like, I had to tell the sheriff what I saw. I'm sorry, but it looks bad. She does say that I don't think he would do something like this. Like, I know him. But still, once again, it looks bad. So then, uh, when Clark goes to talk to the sheriff confirms that Jonathan was drinking a lot, that he had a high alcohol level, and that supposedly the bartender said that Jonathan was swinging back shots and whatnot. And they show flashbacks of Jonathan at the bar just drinking and drinking away. He's drunk as shit. And at first, you're like, holy shit, is this real? Because if that's the case, Jonathan lied to Martha and Clark, and that's pretty fucked up. And then they show that, yeah, he goes off. And then they show flashbacks of Jonathan actually being the one that shot Lionel. And even though I vaguely remembered the scene, the image of Lionel being shot and falling off the thing, I didn't remember this episode at all as far as who the culprit was, this whole mystery shooter. Like, I didn't remember how this wrapped up or how this ended, how this concluded. So for a lot of this speculation back and forth, it had me going. And you see that while the police are searching the Kent house, they find the watch that Lionel gave to Martha in the previous episode, and the engraving on it saying with much affection, LL, not Cool J, but LL, Lionel Luthor. And it's, Martha says that Jonathan found this watch and he lost his shit, and that's what led him to go to Lionel, and that's what started the argument. I think they show the flashback of Jonathan saying to him about the watch, and Lionel saying that, oh, it was nothing, like it was like as expensive as it was. It was nothing for me to buy that. Basically reinforcing how much higher he is and how much easily he can get Martha stuff. It was pretty fucked up. Lionel definitely has given plenty of people good reason to want him dead. And Jonathan, it's not in his character, but I can't say I wouldn't blame him, especially after that conversation, why he would have killed him. Then, Dominic, Lionel's assistant, who we had previously seen before, he shows up and he tells the sheriff that he actually thinks Lex Luthor is the one that killed and shot Lionel, that he had motive. He had just gotten into an argument with Lionel, something about Lionel, him buying out the factory and essentially making Lex having to work for Lionel under him again. And so it was this whole issue. And so he thinks Lex is the one who shot. Clark also, him and Pete go and they're investigating the scene. Clark, with his x-ray vision, finds a bullet, a random bullet in like the corner of the shed or of something. Clark pieces together that maybe, the person used the gun to plant it on Jonathan, get the gunpowder on Jonathan, and here's the evidence here. He tries to tell the sheriff. The sheriff's like, that doesn't really prove anything. But Clark, hey, he's trying. Now, after this assistant guy says what he says, Clark immediately goes to Lex and says, what the fuck? It was interesting because actually before Clark went to talk to the sheriff, Lex was talking to the sheriff, and he turns and walks right past Clark, almost like shoulder butts him. Because to Lex, the theory is that Jonathan shot Lex's father, and so there's a part of Lex that probably thinks like, man, as much as I tried to befriend the Kents, as much as I tried to be civil to them, and I've helped them, potentially Jonathan Kent shot and almost killed my father. It was so quick. It was a brief beat. But Clark caught it. And then after he hears what the assistant says, Clark goes to the office. barges in, yells at Lex, like, what the hell? Why didn't you tell the cops about the fight that you had? Oh, are you going to let my father go down? Did you have something to do with it? Clark is throwing a lot of accusations at Lex. And I get that Clark is desperate to save his father or help his father or figure this out. And maybe, it's not hard to believe that Jonathan is in the pecking order of Clark's life. Obviously, yeah, Jonathan and Martha are number one. But he was so quick to turn on Lex. He was so quick to maybe assume the worst in Lex that I didn't blame Lex when Lex was like, what the fuck? Really? You're going to I thought you knew me better. I thought we were better than this after everything I've done. He's like, you know what, Clark? You can leave. Get out. Goodbye, Clark. And for one of the few times I was on Lex's side there, I thought Clark was a little out of line, although I do understand what was going on. So then Clark and Pete go to the bartender to ask him questions. The bartender confirms that, yeah, Jonathan was drinking and drunk and blah, blah, blah. And he, sort of says that he thinks Jonathan did shoot him. Clark loses his temper, picks him up, right? And the bartender's like, you're just like your old man. It wasn't until I watched Talkville that they said that Clark has been to this bar before. He went to this bar when he was on Red K with that girl, that criminal girl. And Clark beat up a bunch of other guys here and wrecked the bar. So it's funny that the bartender never pointed that out, never said that, you think I forgot that you, caused damage here and I didn't say anything or I didn't hold you to it because of who your father was, but now, that's not the case anymore. I'm surprised. Sometimes continuity for little stuff like that would be nice because although I forgot about it, so I guess the writers did as well. As they're leaving, Pete and Clark, they're driving and they get run off the road by this semi truck. It was like, what the fuck? This huge ass truck runs them off the road. Then some masked guy gets out of the driver's seat and shoots with a sniper, shoots a bullet into their car, blows up the car right after Clark is able to speed Pete out of the car. But Pete just lost his fucking car. And it was a nice car too. So that sucks. But at least Clark saved his life. So now they're figuring out that there's a bigger and wider conspiracy here. Somebody does not want them to get closer to what's going on. So obviously that makes them dig deeper into this. Lex finds out what happened to them. And Lex tells Clark that, okay, you know what? I think Dominic, the assistant, Lionel's assistant, that he's the one behind this. I didn't know for sure, and I was waiting to see if I could get more proof. And him doing or somebody doing this attack on Clark and Pete might confirm it. And Clark's still like, really? You had this idea, this theory, and you didn't bring it up to help my father now? That, I guess Clark had a decent point. So you see that Chloe digs into Lana's father's past because Chloe's trying to figure out why wouldn't he help Clark's father. It was a nice moment where Chloe was looking at the headline of the school newspaper that had Jonathan's arrest in it, and she felt like shit having to report it. So she did her own digging, and I like that when she told Lana that she looked up into her father, she said it in a way where she's like, normally people are pissed when I tell them that I dug into their family stuff. And Lana didn't really know how to react. She was just sort of standing there. So Chloe was like, well, since you're not getting pissed, I can continue, right? And Lana's like, well, I'm curious too why he didn't help. And so you find out that when Henry was a lawyer, he did some cases either for or against Lionel, I forget. But there was one case where Lionel tried to get Henry to, rig it or whatever. Henry turned him down. And so essentially Lionel shut down his his offices, and maybe that's why. Maybe he's afraid of Lionel, whatever. Lana confronts her father about this information. He gets super defensive. He's even like, "Oh, you're looking into my past." He's like, "I didn't ask you to come into my life," which is really fucking fucked up. Lana even got kind of emotional and was like, "Well, fuck off." Okay, she didn't say that, but she was like, "Well, excuse me, you don't have to worry about me meddling in again." And then he feels bad, so he confides and he admits that, yes, there was a case where this happened with Lionel, but that's not what shut him off of being a lawyer. There was another case where he took the job because he didn't really care anymore, and he accidentally got his client guilty, had him get the death sentence, only for them to find more evidence later that he was innocent. So basically, Henry indirectly got his client executed, so he blamed himself. So he's never wanted to be a lawyer ever again, to risk doing that again. Now, I get that they're trying to maybe establish the character of Lana's father, trying to establish that he's had his own past, or he has his own run-ins with the Luthors. Everybody in Smallville seemingly has a connection to the Luthors, but it's something to where I'm kind of confused on what the whole point of her father is. Previous episode, his wife told her to stay away from Henry, and I guess she just ignored that because she's talking to him like everything's fine. And he even agrees now to be Jonathan's lawyer, and so he's helping out. And I say this too because at the beginning of the episode, when right before Lionel got shot, he's on the phone with somebody, and he mentions that Martha does not work for him anymore. And I thought that was interesting because didn't the last episode Jonathan told Martha not to resign, that they could use the leverage of her being close to Lionel and finding out what more dirt Lionel knows, or preventing him from getting more stuff on Clark? What happened to that? How did we miss that? It felt like either somehow, some way, whoever wrote this came in and disregarded that and just is like, let's just move on from Martha and Lionel, I guess. But also, it also feels like maybe there was an episode missing. Like maybe there was an episode that was supposed to happen that covers her leaving, or why he fires her, or something happening, and it's like we just skipped over that, glossed over that. So I thought that was odd. So then we find that Pete and Clark go back to the bartender's bar, and because they hear that the bartender's now missing, he's the only one that could maybe confirm, that he was paid off to spike Jonathan's drink. So they're trying to confirm that maybe somebody else is behind this. So they go there, and Clark finds the bartender's dead body in the ice chest. And it's like, oh, fuck. Okay, so somebody is covering their tracks. They have killed the bartender. And so there you go. So now the episode ends. Like I said, this was a pretty good whodunit. They gave you 3 suspects that all conceivably make sense on why they would want Lionel dead. But the reveal, they set a trap. Clark sets a trap. He puts out the word that Lionel is doing better, because previously he was in a coma, but they hear that Lionel is getting better, basically so that the killer can come to the hospital to finish the job. So Clark sets up like a camera, and the person walks in, I guess no mask, no nothing. There's no cameras in the hospital. And they shoot at the bed. You just see their hands and the gun. You don't see their face yet. Clark shows up and says, aha! We knew that you would show up once we put the word out that Lionel was doing better. We did all of this to catch you. And then the camera reveals that it's the fucking sheriff. And I was like, what the fuck? What do you mean it's the sheriff? I mean, granted, this was good in a way of like, the reveal was a surprise. The reveal was it did make me out loud say, what the fuck? I was not expecting the sheriff. I did not remember the sheriff being the mystery killer behind all of this. And then you get him explaining, oh, Lionel, the Luthors are horrible for this town. They need to be gone. They're the worst. And Clark had a really good response where he says, well, the Luthors did not just murder people. Well, I mean, Lionel and Lex have murdered people, but not in this case, right? And he says that, they didn't set my father up for murder, and he basically tried to get him to rot. All of this is good points of whatever the sheriff thought he was doing for the good of the town or good of the people, he's now become the monster, or just as much of a monster as what he says the Luthors are. So yeah. Now, Talkville was talking about how much this didn't make any sense. How much the reveal of the sheriff being the killer was too random, too out of left field, and too forced. And I understand that. Like, if people feel that way, I'm like, yeah, I can't argue that. But I guess it didn't bother. Like, I don't have this attachment to the sheriff to the way where I'm like, oh man, we're going to lose the sheriff. I just kind of thought, Lionel's assistant made the most sense when Lex thought it was the assistant and he had reasons for it. Like, oh, the assistant was upset that Lionel was going to basically have Lex work under him. The assistant thought that he would get that position. Like, so that made the most sense. The sheriff, you had to throw in, because the episode ends with Lex talking to Lionel. Lionel has now woken up. And Lex asks him about what's going on with the sheriff. Why did he try to kill you? And Lionel tells the story of how some time ago the sheriff needed help with something. So he was desperate. He goes to Lionel for money. But he tells him this is a one-time thing. And I'm not trying to have this be ongoing. And Lionel says, well, the problem is that now I have dirt on you. So you have to, from now on, work for me. You now have to do whatever I ask you to do, or I will expose you. And so the sheriff, feeling cornered, I guess, conspired this whole thing to try to kill him. And so, yeah, sure, fine. The writers in the show manufactured a way for the sheriff to want him dead. But once again, I don't remember, or I never really got the vibe that the sheriff was dirty from previous episodes. He has been around. He has been there. And it just kind of felt like, well, maybe the writers just thought this would be the most surprising. And it was, for sure. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below. What do you think of Suspect? Do you like it? Just as far as it was a darker episode, the whole whodunit flashback stuff, like I enjoyed all of that? Or did you feel like it was too much, too forced, too many flashbacks? Was the reveal of the sheriff too over the top? Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later.